Well, we brought home the 6 gold and it was just a big mess. But let's get to the crux of things. Is it legal what the CS for sports, Dr. Hassan Wario, did? Disbanding NOC, is it legal?
Technically speaking, it is, according to Kenyan law, but according to the international regulations of the Olympic Charter, it's illegal.
He kept flashing the Olympic Charter.
Yeah.
What does it exactly say? What are the repercussions for Kenya?
Yeah, so according to the Olympic Charter, there are certain principles of sporting autonomy, which means all their national Olympic committees must be able to run their affairs without government interference. Now, when it comes to Kenya, we've had a long history of government interference, although they call it government intervention. Now, the difference between interference and intervention is if the international sporting community sees that act as being positive, it's intervention. If it's negative, it's interference. Now, the cabinet secretary said he got his powers to disband NOC through the Sports Act. And I believe he might be looking towards section 53, 52, 54 on appointment of new committee members or appointment of a new body to either inspect, investigate, or take over the affairs of a certain national sports organization. But the manner in which he did it was very wrong.
Mm-hmm. Is NOC the only party to blame for what has come to be the Rio mess?
I don't think so. I think he's the officer at the top, and the buck always has to stop at the top. And you have to look at other things. The Biennale, the Venice Biennale, which is the Art Olympics. We completely messed that up. We sold it to some Italian, Chinese people, and then when Kenyan artists said this thing is completely wrong, he scrapped it. But then the Italian had a letter from the Ministry of Culture and Sports. Number 2, the Smithsonian Folklife Festival. So these things have been happening under his watch. Mm-hmm. So he cannot say that it's just NOC to blame. There's a history of incompetence under his watch. He
mentioned a steering committee, Sarah, and what is the steering committee mandated to do, and who sits in that committee?
Right. So the Olympic Charter actually allows for there to be a local steering committee for the preparation of any team which is going to the Olympic Games. And that committee usually has the National Olympic Committee members, a member from the ministry in charge of sports at the time, and I think a member now, at least from the Sports Fund or any other sports institution that has been put into effect by the Sports Act. So these members are the ones who are in charge of coming up with the list of names of people who are going to Rio and coming up with how are they going to finance these people to Rio and getting their uniforms, etc., etc. So I don't think he really participated as much as he should have when it came to the steering committee. I think he mentioned that he was only there for one meeting. I don't know if he was there for any others, but his permanent secretary should have been there all along, so that any red flags which could have come up during the course of these meetings should have been raised then.
Mm-hmm. So is it at that point then we have joyriders coming in? There were 177 Kenyans in that delegation and only about 83 athletes. So where does it come? We get some sons and daughters joining the delegation. Was they supposed to be part of that delegation in the first place?
Of course not. But I think you'll see some of them under physiotherapists and psychologists who the athletes never saw. They only saw them in the dining room. So these are things that are going to come out in the next few days. And those things, again, the buck has to stop with him. If not, then he has to say that he has no control over this position. He has no control over the people under him. And then he's thoroughly incompetent. So there's a lot of things going on there that are a real mess. Yeah.
I'm going back to NOC because it appears that it's the one now that is going to take up all the blame. And of course, there has been a few charges. For example, we have the Sports Kenya finance director, Mr. Francis Githaiga, who was charged today in court over the same mess. Yet, it is the same department, Sports Kenya, that the CS takes the responsibilities of NOC to?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Sports Kenya has several functions under the Sports Act. One of these functions is to facilitate and prepare the national team to any international event. Now, as much as our cabinet secretary was telling us that it is the responsibility of NOC and only NOC to take this team to Rio and in its preparations, even the Olympic Charter has recognized that a National Olympic Committee cannot act in a vacuum, and it cannot act in solitude. It has to act in support of the government of the day. So there's a joint effort, and there's definitely two sets of people to blame. It's not only NOC Kenya, even the government and the ministry itself had a role to play.
Now, Jackie, we've covered very many Olympics.
Yes.
Is it that these officials have been there for too long, the NOC officials, that they no longer see anything as a big deal?
Think about 2012. That was a mess. I mean, we came back with only 2 gold medals. That, I could say on paper, that was the strongest team we've ever sent to an Olympics in our 60-year history of going to the Olympics. What happened? Has anybody been punished? No. Where is the report? It's gathering dust. The first thing that Wario should have done when he came to office was look at that report and make recommendations going forward. And now that's when he really should have cleaned up house. So NOC is a mess, and the ministry is a mess, and these things have happened time and time again, and it needs to stop.
We need to set the record straight, and maybe very many people do not understand how NOC is constituted and what are the roles. What is the role of NOC? Do they only show up during the Olympics? But maybe you can elucidate on that.
So NOC is a private organization governed by private rules known as its constitution. And one of the things that NOC should do is come up with the list of athletes who are going to go to Rio through association with the other national federations, of course. The other thing is for NOC to try and come up with the funds by which these athletes will go to Rio. Now, there's something that has to be said about the federations themselves, and even the sports people and the coaches who are taken up or they're listed as part of the team of Kenya going to Rio. If indeed there's 170 plus people on the list, and you're saying only 87 are athletes and coaches and trainers and medical practitioners, then why didn't these sportsmen and coaches come up and challenge this? Because we have a sports disputes tribunal, which in effect is actually given that power to listen to such kind of cases. If you've been left out, or if someone is not supposed to be in that team, come up and say so. I think we've gone past the point of pointing fingers at everyone else. Now everyone has to take responsibility, and if you want to move forward, everyone has to play their part.
Indeed. Now, just a few minutes ago, Wesley Korir, who was a marathon runner in the National Olympics team, tweeted that he's glad that he is leaving Rio de Janeiro, of course, Nairobi bound. And earlier he had tweeted of the deplorable conditions that the team has had to endure after the Olympic Village was closed. Now, Edmond Nyabola brings us the cycle of faux pas that has become the Rio mess.
Even before the dust settles on who is to blame for what, it is emerging that athletes who are still in Rio are living under deplorable conditions after the closure of the Olympic Village. According to tweets and pictures posted by marathon runner Wesley Korir, the athletes are sleeping and eating in favelas with no team official in sight. NOC says that is the government's problem.
Once the village is closed, everybody is required to go out, find their own alternative accommodation. So it was the responsibility of the ministry to find alternative accommodation for these athletes while awaiting today's flight.
The troubles surrounding Team Kenya's participation in the 2016 Olympic Games started way before the team left the country for Rio. As soon as the CS for Sports Hassan Wario opened the athletics camp at Kazimingi Farm in Eldoret, top athletes led by Korir complained of poor handling of the team in camp. Concerns quickly brushed off by NOC and the government as mere politics. The steering committee, headed by the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Sports, Ambassador Richard Ekai, is mandated to ensure that the team is well taken care of, but Wario insists his ministry had nothing to do with the preparation for the trip.
That they're responsible for transportation, accommodation, for the equipment, and also for the uniform. Even the color of the uniform is decided by the National Olympic Committee.
Ni kama wametuacha peke yetu sasa.
Some of the athletes, led by world javelin champion Julius Yego, were stranded at the airport because of lack of tickets to Brazil. Knox says that was not their responsibility. Get to Brazil, and some of the athletes found themselves without proper accreditation. And yet, Knox and Anjambi, in charge of documentation, packed up and went to Rio early enough, apparently to ensure every detail was taken care of.
That one I may not be able to answer.
As the athletes and technical staff languished in Rio due to lack of accreditation, ministry officials and NOC accredited joyriders who had no business being in Rio. In total, Wario says 177 individuals made the trip, only 83 of them being athletes. He, however, declined to share the list with the media.
I'm entitled to a guest, and I took my son and I stayed with him in my hotel. I paid all the necessary expenses for him, and I even bought his ticket because he was not accredited. I bought his ticket to watch whatever games he wanted to watch.
Then comes the perennial issue of hoarding of team kits, apparently for unauthorized sale. Nike has complained that whatever they gave might not have been distributed fully. But again, no one had a straightforward answer.
I attended one or two of the steering committee meetings there. I asked, I had a checklist of things. Is accommodation fine? Yes, it is fine. Are the kids there? They are there. They are actually arriving over the weekend, and everybody will get their kids. Is this right? Everything was right. So, for me to hear the kids, not all the kids reach the athletes.
Wario's response to all this, disbanding the National Olympic Committee and constituting a probe team to investigate the issues surrounding Kenya's bungled trip to Brazil. The move by the Cabinet Secretary for Sports, Dr. Hassan Wario, to disband the National Olympic Committee marks the beginning of what is going to be a very long tussle between the government and the committee itself. The first issue of concern is whether the government has authority over the National Olympic Committee. NOC says they do not have an authority over them, and they will be seeking legal recourse after consulting the International Olympic Committee. Edmond Nyabola, NTV Sports, Nairobi.
All right. Edmond Nabola, of course, is the legal recourse that this will take. What is the direction that this might take now?
Well, there's a three-pronged direction. The first one would be for IOC to actually reach out and suspend Kenya from any future international competition, which is something that we do not want. The other recourse would be for the government itself to take on a public policy direction of this and actually charge the people who are in charge of taking care of the finances of this entire trip and get them in terms of criminal law and accountability and anti-corruption. That's something that they can do. Now, in terms of NOC, unfortunately, I can't give you everything that they are going to do right now, but they do have several options, because what we've seen is the minister has gone above and beyond his powers and he's disbanded NOC. So they have a few options which I cannot discuss.
So what can Kenyans expect and actually demand from the current government?
I think we cannot keep any of them. I don't think we can keep the cabinet secretary. I don't think we can keep NOC. There's been a lot of lethargy under him. Bills on culture, bills on language have not gone through. Events, big international events have been an embarrassment at the Smithsonian in Washington, at the Venice Biennale, at the Olympics, at the Commonwealth Games, and he's the one at the top. So the buck stops with him. He cannot blame anyone else. And if he's continuing to blame people, that means that then he's not fit for the job. So he must go.
All right.